are honoured to be gathered to acknowledge country,
dance on country, sing on country, visit country. We speak to country, care for country, long for country.
we pay our respects to elders, past and present, and thank them for passing on their knowledge, our language and spiritual connection to country. Country is lived on and lived with. Country gives and receives life.
So today, Catholic social teaching. Catholic social teaching provides us a lens through which we can discern how we are called to live in community with others and with all of creation. It's based on scripture, tradition, our God-given reason, and the lived experiences of humanity that show God working in the world through all of us. It's not an exhaustive set of rules, but it is dynamic and growing as we ourselves grow in the understanding of God's action in the world through humanity. Sadly, in 1998, the US Catholic bishops wrote in a reflection that far too many Catholics are unfamiliar with the basic content of Catholic social teaching. They said, more fundamentally, many Catholics do not adequately understand that the social mission of the Church is an essential part of the Catholic faith. And this poses a serious challenge for all Catholics, since it weakens our capacity to be a church that is true to the demands of the gospel. And they said, we need to do more to share the social mission and message of our church. Some of the major themes of Catholic social teaching include these elements: human dignity, preferential option for the poor, promotion of peace, stewardship of creation, and there's nothing official about that list. Look at it again. There's nothing official about this list, and many people use other lists. Some have 6, some have 7, some have 9, 10, 11, 12. And Father Ken Hines, who teaches Catholic social teaching regularly, makes a point of saying that there are 2 overarching themes, and those are dignity and community. There is a 4-part series on YouTube that you could listen to that Father Ken Hines talks about Catholic social teaching. So if anyone's interested in scanning the QR code or going to that playlist, that's where you'd find a more thorough look at what we're talking about today. Justice, Pope Benedict said, is inseparable from charity and intrinsic to it. Justice is the primary way of charity. On the one hand, he said, charity demands justice, recognition, and respect for the legitimate rights of individuals and peoples. It strives to build the earthly city according to law and justice. On the other hand, charity transcends justice and completes the logic of giving and forgiving. Charity always manifests God's love in human relationships as well. It gives theological and salvific value to all commitment for justice in the world. And Pope Benedict wrote this in Caritas in Veritate. Today, we hope to look through the lens of Catholic social teaching in relating with the First Nations peoples of this land. At the heart of Catholic social teaching is the proclamation that we all have inherent dignity as we are created by God and we are expressions of God, and no one is outside that circle. Pope John Paul, in addressing the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in Alice Spring in 1986, spoke directly to this, saying, "Your culture, which shows the lasting genius and dignity of your race, must not be allowed to disappear. Do not think that your gifts are worth so little that you should no longer bother to maintain them. Share them with each other and teach them to your children. Your songs, your stories, your paintings, your dances, your languages must never be lost." We know that and Pope John Paul II also quotes Pope Paul VI, who also addressed the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in a 1970 visit here. Pope Paul VI said, "You know that you have a lifestyle. We know that you have a lifestyle proper to your own ethnic genius or culture, a culture which the Church respects and which she does not in any way ask you to renounce. Society itself is enriched by the presence of different cultural and ethnic elements. For us, you and the values you represent are precious. We deeply respect your dignity and reiterate our deep affection for you." The Church proclaims that you, like all other ethnic minorities, have human and civic rights in every way equal to those in the majority, that the common good can never be used legitimately as a pretext to harm the positive values of your particular way of life. Now, sadly, we know that the fact is, at the same time these words were being spoken, children were still being taken away from their families. The sudden clash of cultures here 200 years ago brought some patterns of behavior from which the Aboriginal peoples were unable to protect themselves. Pope John Paul said this in 1986. He spoke then about the dispossession and racism still experienced by the First Nations peoples. Tragically, the dispossession and racism he referred to then remains largely true today, 40 years later. So this brings me to an invitation to discussion. Being made in the image and likeness of God, we have an inviolable dignity. Anything that is offensive to that dignity is unjust. So I'd like to invite you to type your responses in the chat, or please feel free to express them in person here. The question I invite you to ask is, what comes to mind when you think of something offensive to dignity? What kind of experiences might you have had from other people or society or government that made you feel smaller or worth less than what you are? Please feel welcome to chime in. For myself, no one else has anything to share. I can think of the countless times when people have asked me whether I shower because am I dirty because of the color of my skin? Or do you ever comb your hair? It looks like a bird's nest. And when people refuse to serve me, or they tail me inside the shop because they think I'm going to steal something. So these are all things that have diminished me as a person, or at least some I'm perceived as less than others. And these are, I think, examples of how dignity is offended. So in that same sort of line of thinking, I just want to ask, what comes to mind when you think of something offensive to the dignity of First Nations peoples. And you're welcome to type something in the chat or answer here if you like, but also take this question with you and talk in your own circles, because that's where ideas come. And that's where thinking can grow.
At a very fundamental level, the displacement of families and children.
Yeah.
Every right they had.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder too how First Nations people felt, you know, just even in the most recent election campaign, having people say, oh, we're sick of acknowledgement of country and stuff like that. We're sick of all of that stuff, as if it's a trivial thing. You know, I think a lot of people would have been offended by that.
And I actually met a young First Nations lady who spoke about exactly that. And when she went to a particular parish, not her usual parish, where they refused to do the acknowledgement of country, and she left feeling so hurt and thinking about whether she wanted to go back there ever again at all before she calmed down and talked it out with others. So I do believe that I'm sure more people felt hurt by that kind of rhetoric. So these are some of the things that offend the dignity of the First Nation peoples of our land. We see them facing entrenched disadvantage, political exclusion, intergenerational trauma, like you said, Anthony, and ongoing institutional racism. And this is from the government's own Closing the Gap document. If you want to read more, that's the link, and that's the QR code where you can access the full report. In the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference 2023-2024 Social Justice Statement, Listen, Learn and Love, the Bishop urges to recognize that no one knows the depths of pain and humiliation endured by the original inhabitants of this continent better than they themselves do, and that the wounds are many and that there is still need for much healing. The statement calls for more listening in humility to not just historical injustices, but also the ones that continue today. It is not just injustice at the hand of colonial and government authorities, the bishop's statement says. It is also injustice for which we in the church are responsible. The path forward, they stress again, lies in listening with humility and love to what those most affected by it have to say to us. Subsidiarity, that's another principle in Catholic social teaching. It's about empowerment and responsibility. The Catholic social teaching's principle of subsidiarity calls for returning decision-making power to those most affected by an issue. In relations to First Nations peoples, this would look like restoring their agency and full participation in decisions affecting their communities. The compendium of the social doctrine of the church, where you find the full Catholic social teaching laid out in a logical manner, well, for up to now, I guess. It states that every person, family, and intermediate group has something original to offer to the community. Experience shows that the denial of subsidiarity limits the spirit of freedom and initiative. This principle also states that when local communities cannot meet their own needs, then other parts of society and government have the duty to assist with this and support. But the initiative, the desire, and the ideas spring from the local level rather than top down. So in the Listen, Learn and Love statement from our bishops, former WA Senator Patrick Dodson is quoted saying, "The track behind us is littered with the relics of policies, programs, and projects that failed, that wasted taxpayers' money, that failed to deliver real outcomes to those crying out for them. they failed mainly because they did not include Indigenous people in making the decisions. Nothing about us without us is a saying which many of us share to emphasize the need for us to be at the decision-making table. So his words help illustrate how crucial subsidiarity is. And I recently came across another example of subsidiarity in action. A news story reported that funds redirected from incarceration to community early intervention and diversion programs resulted in youth crime rates to plunge on Groote Island in the Northern Territory. The community intervention yielded the staggering result of youth crime against persons or property dropped by 95%. So like in 2018-19, there were 346 cases, and the following year period, there was 17, from 346 to 17. And this was just the elders taking over. If you go to this website, smarterjustice.org.au, this particular link, you can watch a video and see more details about what they did and how they achieved that. To me, this is such a great example of how empowerment and giving community the agency can change things. Subsidiarity works when we can respect people's cultures, systems of governance, their processes of making decisions, and honor their dignity. Solidarity is another principle of Catholic social teaching. It's about being responsible for each other, standing together. I recently heard a quote which echoes Pope Benedict's thinking, which I referenced to earlier about charity and justice being linked. It goes something like this: the opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. And it's a sentiment expressed by an American lawyer, Brian Stevenson, who works with the poor and the incarcerated in his community. The truth is that poverty afflicts those disenfranchised or disfavored by society, and justice works to ensure that everyone can have a fair go. Justice is the primary way of charity, Pope Benedict said. Money can alleviate poverty, but so long as unjust systems persist, poverty will persist too. So key steps in making a change are truth-telling and listening, because these will help uncover how things came to be the way they are. And when you know that, then we can plan how to move forward. This fits with Catholic social teaching's principle of solidarity, which calls for a deep sense of belonging to and being responsible for each other, personally and socially. So knowing each other's stories, then we can walk together. I'd like to invite you to think again about this, a new question. We are responsible for one another. We are called to act on this to help each other fulfill our full potential. So in light of that, what does a solidarity like this look like in your own life? Is there anyone that you feel so invested in that you feel responsible for them and belonging to them? Can you think of any examples from your own relationships?
Well, yeah. I'm a catechist, but we look after the catechists and our students in the public schools. It happens all the time. People say, why aren't you in a Catholic school? Why are you going out as volunteers to teach these children the Catholic faith? So that's an example.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great example, actually. Mm-hmm. And for me, I guess it also goes back to maybe my husband and my children, because I remember learning in marriage preparation that You need to be vulnerable enough to belong to each other. Like you belong to me, I belong to you. So you care for them as if you were caring for your own self and your own needs. I can't think of a clearer example in my life of solidarity than that. Maybe friends, yeah.
Sometimes too, it's just like bearing witness. Like sometimes there's nothing we can actually do, but standing with, being with, just just the comfort of having another person with you when you're going through a terrible time is an act of solidarity that never feels like it's enough, but it's so important.
Especially if someone's going through grief, you don't know what to say to solve that problem.
I was thinking too of we've just had Easter, the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus said to the three, "Stay with me," and they fell asleep. But that really human desire, just for someone to be with you as you're going through such a terrible time.
That's right. Thank you, Julie. And which leads me to the next question, which is, what might it look like to walk with First Nations peoples in solidarity? So it might not be doing necessarily, but also just accompanying with respect. And that's the sort of thing that this website, indigenousvoice.church, tells us. Some of the suggestions are learning about First Nation people's challenges and joining them as they campaign for justice, or practicing deep listening as taught by their cultures. So we look next at the principle of the common good, which means working for the good of everyone. The principle of common good, to which every aspect of social life must be related if it is to attain its fullest meaning, stems from the dignity, unity, and equality of all people, says the social doctrine of the Church. The common good is about ensuring our social conditions and social structures allow everyone to reach our fullest potential more easily. To quote Pope Benedict from Caritas in Veritate once again, to desire the common good and strive towards it is a requirement of justice and charity. To take a stand for the common good is, on the one hand, to be solicitous for, and on the other hand, to avail oneself of. So you're giving and you're receiving. That complex of institutions that give structure to the life of society, juridicially, civilly, politically, and culturally making the polis or the city. So, you're building society. The more we strive to secure common good corresponding to the real needs of our neighbors, the more effectively we love them. Every Christian is called to practice this charity in a manner corresponding to his or her vocation and according to the degree of influence we wield in the polis. So within our circles of control, what can we do to stand in solidarity, to create common good, to work toward common good? And this is, again, something that I would encourage you to begin talking about within the circles that you move, because who knows what we can come up with when we talk and look for ideas, and everyone's thinking of ideas. We are still a long way away in securing the common good for First Nations peoples, unfortunately. Did we restart something?
No.
I just want to refer to a report by Sister Tiap Nguyen, who interned with the JPO these past few weeks. It's called Voices in the Wilderness. In it, she says that despite progress, First Nations people continue to face severe disparities in health, education, employment, housing, and justice. She illustrated it with some numbers. Indigenous Australians experience a disease burden 2.3 times higher than non-Indigenous Australians and have a life expectancy approximately 10 years shorter. Access to healthcare is limited by racism, remoteness, and culturally inappropriate care. I can't even begin to understand how racism plays into healthcare. Does this mean healthcare professionals refusing to treat certain people? I don't know, it seems appalling to me that this would be real, but it is. In education, as of 2021, 91% of non-Indigenous Australians have completed Year 12, compared to just 68% of Indigenous Australians, often due to poverty, discrimination, and inaccessible curricula. In employment, discrimination, geographic isolation, and lack of career development pathways contribute to disproportionately high unemployment rates among Indigenous Australians. Justice. Indigenous Australians make up around 30% of the prison population, 3.8% of the total population. How this number is staggering to me. Over-policing, systemic racism, and harsher sentencing contribute to these numbers. Despite inquiries and royal commissions, including deaths in custody, implementation of recommendations have been poor. These numbers from Sister Tiap's report, it's heartbreaking. Maybe they also provoke a sense of hopelessness or a sense of despair, like the problem's just too big. Yet knowing these numbers could in itself be a call to action. And our faith calls us to counter despair, counter the kind of despair that these numbers provoke. As Pope John Paul said in Adelaide in 1986, this is one of my favorite quotes. We are an Easter people, and Alleluia is our song. We are not looking for a shallow joy, but rather a joy that comes from faith, that grows through unselfish love, that respects the fundamental duty of love of neighbor. We realize that joy is demanding. It demands unselfishness. It demands readiness to say with Mary, be done unto me according to thy word. Social justice is not simply what gets said. It is what gets done. The opposite of poverty is justice. We are called to work for the common good and to discern and talk about how to change these numbers in solidarity, using subsidiarity, respecting human dignity. Another Catholic social teaching principle is preferential option for the poor. The Catechism of the Catholic Church tells us that to receive in truth the body and blood of Christ given up for us, we must recognize Christ in the poorest, his brethren. Preferential option for the poor reminds us that we must follow Jesus' call to look after the needs of those who are most vulnerable in our society. The poor must be considered above all and their needs addressed within any effort towards the common good. We are called to make them our first and most pressing priority. The US bishops wrote that the needs of the poor take priority over the desires of the rich, the rights of workers over the maximization of profits, the preservation of the environment over uncontrolled industrial expansion. In relation to First Nations people, this might look like uncomfortable and hard work of campaigning for, of advocating for, pushing for changes in society that are in congruence with the principles of Catholic social teaching. How might we do this is a question, again, I would like to invite you to bring home with you and think and discuss. because I think every individual response might differ and every community response might differ depending on where you live or your own realities. But it is important to have that response. If you'd like to read more about Catholic social teaching, these are two resources available here at the Mustard Seed Bookshop down the corridor. The Compendium of the Social Doctrine of the Church, which was compiled under Pope John Paul's time, and the Ducat, which is also an excellent source of information. It breaks it down really well and explains with graphics and pictures and visualization about living the teachings of the Church. Catholic social teaching challenges us to look through the eyes of faith and act in the footsteps of Jesus to respond in love. I'd like to close today with an expression of hope from Pope Francis in Fratelli Tutti. Each day offers us a new opportunity, a new possibility. We should not expect everything from those who govern us, but that would be childish. We have the space we need for co-responsibility in creating and putting into place new processes and changes. Let us take an active part in renewing and supporting our troubled societies. Today, we have a great opportunity to express our innate sense of fraternity, to be good Samaritans who bear the pain of other people's troubles, rather than fomenting greater hatred and resentment. A chance traveler in the parable, we need only have a pure and simple desire to be a people, a community, constant and tireless in the effort to include, integrate, and lift up the fallen. Thank you for your time. I think we can open the floor up to any questions or comments that anyone might have.
Pauline, what do you think about the new Pope, Pope Leo? He seems to be speaking a lot about social justice and the role it plays.
Mm-hmm. And I think the fact that he took the name Leo the 14th itself is a sign of great hope, because it's just throwback to Leo the 13th, whose Rerum Novarum is basically the first encyclical in modern Catholic social teaching that, kind of dragged us into the real world, into addressing labor rights and trying to, if you read that encyclical, it was trying to set that it was a time when children could work or children could be used as things, and the Pope stood against things like that. And I feel that, I think I have read that Leo the 14th is talking about how AI might impact us as human beings. So it's taking social justice and leading us in a direction of thinking further about things like these as well. So I'm looking forward to more from him. He just did his first Instagram post today. And I'd like to see I'd be very curious. I'm actually waiting for his first encyclical just to read what his thoughts are. Hear from him about it.
Yes, I just want to say that I'm just hopeful that things, and it's going to take many years, but just on the weekend we were in Canberra and we actually drove past the tent embassy, and my son was like, "Mum, why is that there? I don't understand why that is there. Why do we need it there? This is their country."
Right.
And so like it's that, it's going to take generations, but it's starting. The conversations are happening in school and things like that. So that actually I've got goosebumps just saying it, but it actually brings hope. But it's going to take time.
I love that your son just automatically said that.
Yeah.
He's
only 8 as well.
Oh, yeah, fabulous.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. If we have no other comments,
Nothing's coming.
questions, then maybe we can close for the afternoon.
Thank you so much, Pauline.
Thank you,
Thank
Pauline. Great.
Stop sharing.
Yeah, you can
I think you just press leave.
try and put Pauline stop the recording in. Yeah, just leave it.
Julia said thank you.
Yeah.